as you're being seated, there are a couple of moments in this chapter that I want to address, not independent of the rest of it, but just go ahead and address the awkward moments first, and then come back and put the flow of the text into good order here. There's this practice in Egypt, and this would have been well known throughout all of the region, the practice of magical incantations and divining of spirits. This practice of either throwing stones out and discerning some kind, or a ciphering out of some kind of a mystic word from the spirits beyond. And this would have been an Egyptian practice. And everyone in the region would know this. So it is kind of peculiar to us. Well, one, we have to stop and ask some questions. Has Joseph been overcome by the religion of Egypt? In the fact that it's actually addressed twice in this text. One, the first time as it shows up is here in verse 5. And the second time it shows up is in verse 15. What we can do with this text is address it from the historical interpretation of this. So in other words, let's go look and see what the ancient scholarly world has to say about this, and then begin even further in this. What is a scholarly right way to interpret this? And is it right for us to either assume that Joseph was a partaker in this, or, as will be my position here, which is in agreement with the ancient scholars as well as even modern day scholars, is that Joseph is not a participant in this practice, this magical practice, this spiritual religion in Egypt, but he does not keep the Egyptians from thinking he does. So that's the general outlook in the scholarly world, is that Joseph, you get it first in the conversation around verse 4 and 5, where Joseph instructs this cup, and this would be one of the ways in which the Egyptians would practice some of their magic, is they would, whatever is poured into the cup, and then they breathe on it or take a sip from it and do some other things with it and then pour it out, and whatever the color is or the way in which the mixture flows out, somehow of their magical ways of thinking on this. Now, keep this in mind. This is what the Egyptians' practice was. This is, as a matter of fact, we believe that the Bible would say to the believer, that's nonsense. Don't go practicing black and dark incantations and spiritual things. So we can't take this in Genesis 44 and say, well, look, if Joseph did it, maybe it's okay for me to dabble in the darks, in the dark magics, in the dark spiritual things. That's not what this is. This is narrative. So we're always needing to do two things with Old Testament narrative. We need to read it as that. And then, through the instruction of the New Testament, when we come back and look at this Old Testament narrative, what here is speaking to us and showing us about the true things of the gospel, the things of God. So we will make that application. Verse 5 does not distract us from it, and to some degree I even kind of wondered, should I even say anything about it, because it is a little bit distracting. But you know what? It was really helpful for me to go and do some other reading about this practice that is being recorded for us here. So Joseph puts this cup into the bag of Joseph, or into the bag of Benjamin, the youngest of the brothers, and he also puts money in all of their bags and sufficient food in everybody's bags for them to go. So this is, you read this, it is indeed a setup. They're setting a piece of furniture or a piece of the silverware, the piece of the religious practice, into one of the bags. They send them out, and then as you see, the narrative unfolds. Joseph instructs his steward, hey, go get them and bring them back, because they've got things that they shouldn't have. Now they don't know that. So there is a setup in play here. So it is true that the steward of Joseph thinks, he's never been instructed otherwise by Joseph, but he thinks that Joseph is a practicer of this Egyptian magic. Joseph has apparently never corrected his thinking. To some degree, we can begin to think strategically on a couple of things. We can say, well, this begins to make a little bit of sense. Joseph is in a foreign land. He's in a high authoritative position. We learned chapters ago that he's in a second of all power in Egypt. Well, his brothers see that position as being equal with Pharaoh. So this is an extraordinarily influential position that Joseph is in. So you can begin to think, well, okay, we can understand he's not lying to them, but he's not correcting them in their assumptions. This would be how the majority of the scholarly world treats this practice in the conversation between the steward and Joseph. So we're going to just acknowledge that it's present. We're not going to be distracted by it, and we also don't have any reason to be troubled by it. It'll show back up in verse 15. Here's the scenario with verse 15. All of the brothers are back in Joseph's house. They've pulled out this cup. It appears that even the brothers know what this is. This is well-known pieces of religious practicing. So those who don't even do it know that they know what this is for. And so it's just brought back up in verse 15. And Joseph he's not saying, oh no, I don't do that. You're crazy to think that I do. But he leaves that. Joseph is still holding his identity back from his brothers. So that is as it is in the narrative flow. Now, what does it have to do with then, how are we going to make application of this for us as we think about the spiritual in the New Testament? Well, I think it plays parts in that as well. So what else should we do here? We have the narrative as it unfolds in verse 1. Joseph instructs his steward, load their bags and send them home. And so keep this in mind. This money has been exchanged back and forth now. This will be the third, if you're keeping track, the brothers bring it with them the first time. They pay for the grain. As Joseph sends them back, he loads their bags back up with all the money they brought with them, as well as food. They go back to their father, and they discover all of the money is present with them. Well, when their father eventually agrees to send Benjamin with them to buy more food, Jacob sends them with enough money to buy more food, and he sends them with the money that was sent back with them the second time. So it's doubled. They're taking back double the amount of money when they go back to Joseph now. So Joseph loads their bags back up, or a steward loads their bags back up with, it appears to be all of the money and sufficient food even for that which they bought. So enough for the journey, plus that which will sustain them for at least some time with grain or corn grain, corn flour for the making of bread. So that money has traveled the trade route multiple times now. And it appears to continue to multiply. Especially when you think about that they're being sent back with the money, with what they bought with the money, as well as enough for the journey home. So what God, what the brothers are doing is God is supplying through Joseph, their brother. They don't know it's their brother, but God is supplying sufficiently for them. And another New Testament principle, above and beyond what you could even imagine possible. This is the way God does things. Now, we follow the narrative here. It's John Gill that I love the way that John Gill describes the way in which Joseph loads the donkey's bags back up. Gill describes it in this as handsomely and honorably. he loads. That phrase, in verse 3, as soon as it was light, the men were sent away, they with their donkeys. And so Gill just describes it as they are sent out handsomely and honorably. Joseph really is expressing more honor than these brothers deserve. So you haven't forgot the larger backstory here, right? We all know how Joseph's in this position. In the first place, it's the providential hand of God. But it is because the brothers first wanted to kill their brother. And then they negotiated a deal, let's just beat him up and make it look like he's dead. Oh, and then let's put him in a well. And then let's sell him to some traders who are on their way to Egypt. So the brothers completely dishonored their brother. And the inverse of this now is Joseph is sending them back to their father. He's doing so with honor. This is grace. This is mercy. They don't deserve to be treated like this. They deserve to be what appears is going to happen to them, to be thrown in jail or their lives taken from them. So the steward sends them off. So we're going to see here that there's going to be two of the characters in the narrative that are going to stand as a type of a Messiah, a type of a Christ. And we know this in the use of this language. Nowhere are we describing them as equal to Christ. To call someone a type of Christ just means we're going to use a certain segment of their life. Sometimes it's the totality of their life. But there's going to be a certain moment in their life where they're going to be standing in as a type. So in other words, they're going to be holding a gospel trumpet. If there's a way to describe in the scene in which they're at, they're actually saying something more than just in the story narrative that's here. They are speaking about the gospel. And so we see Joseph will do that, and Judah will do this as well. Both of them at certain points in this narrative, from chapter 44 to through, really even that, it's going to carry well into chapter 45, that both Joseph and Judah will serve at times as a type of Christ. Joseph will be serving as a type of Christ by the reconciliation that he extends to his brothers. Notice he's the one who's been offended. He's the one that the wrong has been acted against. And he's going to be the one who's going to pursue reconciliation. You see, that's a type of Christ. Man has offended God. Man has sinned against God. And God is going to be the one who's going to initiate and provide reconciliation for those who have acted wickedly against him. Joseph is going to do that, and we'll see that. We do see that. Judah will do the same thing in his appeal to his brother. Now, he doesn't know this is his brother here, but he's going to do the same thing in the appeal to his brother to not keep Benjamin as a slave, because remember, Benjamin's saddlebags on his donkey are the one in which they'll find this cup that belongs to Joseph, that Joseph put in his bag. So Joseph will say, he, the one with the cup, he will stay as my slave. Now, even that is an act of grace, because it would be customary of the laws of this land in Egypt that if you're found with stolen goods, death is the proper punishment for that kind of a crime. So even this will be a grace that rather than death, he's going to stay and serve as a slave. Well, Judah will stand as a type of Christ here. And what is he going to do? He's going to appeal that the judgment upon my brother will be upon him rather than upon his brother. So you see that that's the language of the gospel. It's Christ, the right judgment, the right penalty of the sin that we commit against God is separation from God. This is what God told Adam and Eve in the garden. You shall surely, the serpent questions him, will you surely die? Will you really die? God's the one who says, if you eat of this fruit, you will die. Yes, surely. The grace here is that Christ comes, he takes our place, he imputes his righteousness upon us, all of his characteristics, are on us, and all of our wickedness is cast upon the one who said, put me in their place. So Judah is standing as a type of a Christ here, willing to take the place of another. So the narrative, there is, it's actually quite fascinating to just read the narrative and put the scenes in place. When we get through verse 5 and we move into 6, where the servant has caught up with the brothers, I mean, it's no one should be surprised. I mean, how far away are they, and how long is it going to take them to catch them before they can get home? We just put a couple of real logical things into place. Remember, the brothers have loaded up their donkeys, and the steward, every indication is they're not pursuing the brothers on donkeys. They're pursuing the brothers on horses, fast and furious, agents of war even. The brothers have beasts of burden, slow, methodical, stubborn, yet humble and graceful. So it's when we get to verse number 6, it's like this is the overstatement of the whole narrative. So he overtook them. Well, of course he did. And when he catches them and he overtakes them, he speaks to them these words. And so there's the brothers had to be shocked and surprised. Well, listen, none of us took anything from the Lord of the land, and they're all confident that nobody stole anything. So they speak as one accord. They speak as individuals. No, none of us took anything. Well, the steward demands for the bags to be unpacked. And sure enough, when we get to verse number 12, that as the searching continues from brother to brother, eventually to the youngest, that the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Now, I think it's okay for us to put some assumptions into the narrative where it would be natural to fit. We don't impose anything unnatural to it. But don't you know, Benjamin had to be sitting there with his jaw wide open. I didn't put that in my bag. And this is actually a real, I think, a beautiful thing. There's no indication in the narrative that the brothers are slapping their hands to their foreheads going, I knew if one of us was going to do it, it would be Benjamin. I think they're all shocked. I think none of them thought, because this would be out of the character. Now, it might have been the character of the brothers back when they overcame Joseph and threw him into a well. But I think we've got reason to believe that the Spirit of God has been working on the hearts of these brothers for a long time. Stirring them, convicting them, breaking them. So anyway, I walked through this thinking, at least with the benefit of doubt, that the brothers' disposition is greatly improved from how they were at previous times. Now, that doesn't mean they'll always be improving. Matter of fact, we'll know that this household is packed full of all kinds of problematic relationships and dispositions. But here, it appears that there's been a good work going on in the hearts of all of the brothers. So they don't even resist going back to Joseph. It's as though we can't explain why this cup is in our bag. Oh, as a matter of fact, we can't even explain why all the money we keep bringing down here keeps being back up in our donkeys as we go home. We don't know how to explain it. So they willingly go back to Joseph's house, and there the conversation moves. The larger piece of the narrative moves between the conversation between Joseph and Judah. And there's where the appeal for the exchange of the judgment to come off of Benjamin and on to Judah. And of course, we know that the narrative is retold. So there's to some degree, we would call this a flashback. We're being reminded of previous conversations. One, we're reminded that Jacob is still grieving the loss of his son, Joseph. And nobody in the narrative knows that he's right in front of them. Jacob has assumed that his son, Joseph, is dead. the time that the brothers brought back the cloak of many colors stained with blood, Jacob has taken on the position Joseph is dead. So then we're also reminded in this flashback expression that Jacob didn't want to send even Benjamin, because all of his affection for Joseph has been now transferred over to Benjamin, and his love for Benjamin is deep. Notice the brothers are not resentful of this transfer of affection off of Joseph onto Benjamin. They actually, you get the feeling that they appreciate that their father has been able to put one foot in front of the other, even though his son Joseph is dead in his mind. But what if Benjamin dies while he's there? What if Benjamin never comes home? So we get a little touch of theological understandings, even though it's pretty shadowy. That's the way the Old Testament is. It will progressively get clearer and clearer. But we get a little understanding of the theology of the house of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That they have with them a theology of afterlife or the grave. Their father, Judah, is using the persuasion to the Lord of the land, who's Joseph. If Benjamin doesn't go home, our father will die and he will go to Sheol. His gray hair will go down with him in sorrow to the grave. So the appeal is fervent. The appeal is sincere. Judah guaranteed his father, Benjamin, will come home. It's now looking like Benjamin will not go home. And this will be the thing that will take their father to the grave. It's great sorrow. We can see human affections are present here. These are all things that one can say it's right, it's good to grieve, to have sorrow, to follow through with your promises. What's one thing we can really appreciate about Judah here, he's in a spot. He has to, in his mind, he has to be in this position. I must do what I told my father would do if Benjamin ended up in trouble here. He would become the surety, the guarantee. If it looks as though Benjamin's not coming home, I will stay. Benjamin will come home. I will do all within my power to assure you that the lad will return home. Well, that's enough for Joseph, for his heart to be completely overtaken with joy. As there is a strategic, we're going to send them away, but we really want to bring them back. I want to test them. Are they going to be honest? Are they going to be sincere? Are their hearts really are they different than they were before? I think that's a fair way for us to assume this is how Joseph is thinking of this. He's testing them. Brings him back, and the appeal, this is sincere, this is real. These are not the same brothers that threw him in a pit decades ago. These are different men. These are men whose lives have been transformed. These are men who now have integrity and honor with them. So as we move then toward the end of chapter 44, we see that Judah really is standing for us as a type. He's offering himself for another, for Benjamin. Benjamin, he's accused, and in this judicial system in Egypt, if you're accused, you're guilty. This would be in modern governments. This is what we would call a Napoleonic judicial system, where the accusation is the judgment. And you are guilty of it until or unless you can prove your innocence. And so Benjamin has not just the accusation, but Benjamin literally has the accusation of a thief. The court would see him as a thief, And he didn't take anything. But the judicial system labels him that, sees him as that, and treats him as that. So Benjamin is kind of standing in for you and me. We are guilty. We are by association, but really by our father Adam, we bear all the markings of one who has sinned against God ourselves. So Judah comes and stands here as the one offering himself in the place of the guilty one. This is what Christ does, isn't it? He comes offering himself for the guilty one. That's you and that's me. So Judah really is he's standing at this moment in a glorious picture of a type of a Christ. And then in chapter 45, verses 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to make a way to the New Testament for just a moment, make some observations there and some application here. But put the narrative into place. Joseph, in chapter 45, Joseph, he can't contain himself any longer. He's like, man, I want to speak to them like my brothers. Not like a foreigner, not like a stranger, not like a lord over them, but as equal brothers. So Joseph could not, the narrative reads, Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. This is chapter 45, verse 1. And he cried. This crying first is, have everyone go away from me. Now remember, Joseph has already struggled with keeping his emotions from others seeing this. When the brothers were there the first time, there's this crying out. There's this, when they were on their return trip, his emotions are, he wants to speak to them as a brother. He cannot keep that a secret any longer here. Verse 1, the middle part of verse 1, where he cries out to have everyone go out from me. He's meaning all the Egyptians, all the stewards, all his servants, everybody in the house who's not of these brothers, they need to leave. So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he's not done weeping, is he? Verse 2, he wept so loudly. I mean, this is loud weeping, isn't it? He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard of it. So the news of this spreads fast into Pharaoh's house because the noise, the level of the weeping is so loud that people outside the room, outside the house, at some point, have you ever been in a neighborhood whenever you hear someone weeping? This last week I was asked from the Prairie School to read chapter 2 of Little House on the Prairie's chapter, and it's the chapter where the dog dies. I think, apparently they don't know me. I can't read about any dog dying without weeping. But I would say by the grace of God, I controlled myself pretty respectfully, church. You didn't hear of my weeping, did you? No. You would have had to find me later. Can you believe the sadness of it? I'm going to start crying now if I'm not careful. The weeping, though, of Joseph is that level of great, beautiful sincerity. Think of the years that have gone by. The brothers have wondered about Joseph. The father's convinced he's dead. God has blessed Joseph in untold ways. Multiplied upon multiplied ways, God has blessed Joseph. Now we'll learn, we already know this, but we'll learn moving forward. There's an eternal work at play here of God strategically placing his servants in proper places at certain times for his will to be accomplished. That's all of what's happening here. So Joseph says to his brothers, I mean, how many times has he wanted to say this in their previous journeys? He just comes right out and says it with an exclamation point. Our English translation gives it, and emphasizing, hey, he didn't just whisper it. He said it. I am Joseph. Now you can already immediately, without reading any more of the verse, just begin to say, well, I know what those brothers are going to think when they hear this. No, that's not possible. We sold you as a slave to the traders who were coming through. Disbelief, despondent, confused. How do you even know about our brother Joseph? I think would be some of the early moments. But Joseph says, I am Joseph. Notice in verse number 3, this is actually really beautiful. Joseph's language no longer is talking about your father. He now says, I want to know about my father. I want to know about him because I've longed to see him. I've asked word of how he's doing. You've given me a report about how your father is, but I want to know, how is my father? Is he still alive? Is it possible that my father is still alive? There's a human affection here. Brothers and sisters, I think this is actually really helpful for us to see the joy that is welling up inside of Joseph, that is from a question of uncertainty that he doesn't even know if his father is alive, but he hopes to hear the word that he is. Now, I think that Joseph would have some conclusions that he is because of the reporting that the brothers have given about their father and about Benjamin's father, and how if Benjamin doesn't come home, their father will die and he will go to the grave. But Joseph wants to know not about their father. He wants to know about his father. It's the same person. It's the same being. But it's very personal here. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Is my father still alive? So we will pick the narrative up, but before we pick more of the narrative up following this, let's go get the good news from the New Testament. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. This is one of many places we could turn to see how the New Testament comes and brings a spotlight and the beam of truth illuminates the pages of the ancient narrative in Genesis 44. What we see here in 2 Corinthians 5 is everything that Genesis 44 and 45 are pointing us to. We see reconciliation. We see imputation. We see salvation. We see, church, we see resurrection in Genesis 44. Well, really, we see it in 45, verses 1, 2, and 3. Joseph has disclosed to his brothers he is alive. So Joseph is essentially dead. Not that they've treated him as dead because they hated him, but they assumed him dead. Christ died for our sin. Died and was resurrected. He is alive. Jesus is. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father. So Genesis 44 paints this picture. And at some point it's a real shadowy way of reading and seeing this, but you see it, don't you? There's reconciliation taking place. The pursuer of that reconciliation is the one who the offense has been brought against, and he's pursuing it, he's establishing it. Then you see a brother positioning himself to be in the place of the one who's found to be guilty. That's imputation. That's the righteous blood of Christ being applied to your life, to my life, that we're about to come to the table and remember together. There's imputation of this. There's the scapegoat picture of salvation. Of the guilt is taken off of the one and it's placed on this one, and this one dies. That's how severe that the transfer is, that it takes His life. This is the promise from the beginning of Genesis. You will die. The requirement is a standard of death. All men will die as a result of this. This will be a physical death, but there is through the imputation, the covering, the transfer of righteousness that we no longer possess in Adam, our father. Because of him, now we are all born in unrighteousness, unable to achieve righteousness ever, unless the Savior come, the Christ, the Messiah, unless God sends His only Son in the form, in the flesh of man, to die for us. There's no possible way for us to carry any righteousness in ourselves. That's imputation. And then there's salvation and resurrection. The hope of the brothers they're in trouble. But the work of the reconciler, he saves them, he rescues them. Just as Paul speaks to the church in Colossae, of speaking of Christ, where he is the express image of the invisible God. And he's come to rescue us from the domain of darkness and to transfer us into the kingdom of His beloved Son. So the gospel is actually being heralded from Genesis chapter 44, and Moses is intending, as he's telling the nation of Israel from his vantage point, all of this stuff is in their past. Moses being the author, the collector of these oral testimonies and stories being compiled into the narrative of God's people. He's telling them, here is our past. And our past has in it the sound of deliverance. From the one who came to deliver them from the hand of the Egyptians, the deliverer is telling them, there's a better deliverer. Now they have a lot to try to figure out still. And so by the grace of God, you and I live in a time where greater light is given to us. We can now read Genesis 44 and piece everything beautifully together for the glory of God.